I just finished watching a televised press conference with Beverly Young Nelson. She's the latest accuser against Roy Moore in what is becoming an absolute spectacle, an inferno of political dynamics in the Alabama Senate race. Now, this woman, obviously her story has to be fully checked out. She was with Gloria Allred. But it gives the story something that has been lacking until now, and that is somebody who is willing to go out on camera. Because her account, her tearful account, as she struggled to find the words to describe what she says happened decades ago, was very powerful in a way that the Washington Post story, because it's done in print, could not be. And what this woman says is that, and it's the most dramatic account against the Alabama Republican nominee for Senate, because she says that she was in his car, she was 16 years old, that he groped her, that he forced himself on her, that Moore grabbed her neck and tried to get her to perform sexual contact with him, that she tried to escape, that he told her nobody would believe her, and that she was left with bruises on her neck. Now, I can't think of a reason, a motivation why she would lie. She said she's a Trump voter, so it doesn't appear to be any kind of political motivation. Now, this comes, of course, after the controversy over the Washington Post story quoting 4 women on the record, particularly one, Lee Kaufman, who says when she was 14, she was kind of befriended by Roy Moore, then a 32-year-old prosecutor, and eventually had some sexual contact with him. Now, the Moore approach has been to attack the Washington Post. In fact, he now says he's going to sue the newspaper, and one of his big supporters, Breitbart, has been going after the Post reporting. And this is fascinating because Breitbart interviewed Lee Kaufman's mother and breathlessly reported that she said that the newspaper had convinced her daughter to give an interview, as if that was some terrible thing. Now, first of all, the Post reporters say they spoke to Lee Kaufman 6 times, so it's not like they're coercing her into it. She chose to go on the record. She also apparently is a Trump voter with no political motivation. So to say, well, they kind of convinced her to do the interview, that's how reporting works. That's what journalism is. I have done that hundreds of times, not just on these kinds of stories, but anybody who's taking on somebody powerful, an ordinary citizen, a government employee, a whistleblower, may be very reluctant to speak. And you have to kind of talk to them. You don't badger anybody, but you explain that they'll get a fair hearing, that they'll be quoted accurately, that they are, you kind of encourage them to do what they think is right. And I don't, it's so partisan because, people who like former Judge Moore raising questions about the Washington Post motivation. But when the allegations came out from various women in the New York Times, the New Yorker against Harvey Weinstein, against other actors and entertainers, Louis C.K. in the New York Times, against journalists at Fox News and MSNBC at NPR, unless there was some political motivation, you didn't usually see someone saying, well, they talked those sources into giving interviews. That is how the process works. Now, the Washington Post is certainly fair game for criticism in terms of the way that story was presented, but I don't see where the paper did anything wrong. And if you think that these 4 women somehow, who didn't know each other, decided they're going to go after Roy Moore, now the televised appearance by Beverly Young Nelson does raise the question, is it possible for Roy Moore to stay in this race, especially yesterday with Mitch McConnell saying he believes the women, he thinks Roy Moore should go out. Now, only Roy Moore can make that decision. But as the evidence mounts, or at least as the accusation mounts, obviously he's entitled to the presumption of innocence in a legal sense, but politically, things are getting awfully difficult for the Roy Moore campaign.